Hello everybody. We're going to be doing chapter 4 this week, but this is a look back at chapter 3, our module summary. So overall we did a great job. Your grades are looking great. We are going to be, let's see. The way we did the exams, okay, the net labs went great. I was pretty pleased with that overall. There were some good comments, and I want you to tell me when something goes wrong because that's really the only way we can figure out what happened. Or tell on yourself, oh, I did this, but I figured it out. And a lot of the net labs, if it's really great when you get a chance to do them again and again without the instructions eventually. That's when you really know what you're doing. So it's a good opportunity, and we're only on our third one so far, so we're going to be moving along. We're going to skip number 4. We're going to go to number 5 next, but anyway, this is about the Chapter 3 summary. The main thing I want to talk about, two things. In the discussion board, there was a discussion of DHCP versus APIPA, and the real distinction that you're trying to make is DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and it will dynamically assign IP addresses from the scope that's been provided by the ISP if that's requested. There's also static addresses, which can be manually set, and those are really good for a particular, like a website that you really don't want to change, you don't want something to change. So you can go in and do that. The only disadvantage doing them manually is you do have human error. So you could end up with a mismatch of duplicated IP addresses because you did them statically. Now the thing about DHCP versus APIPA is the automatic private IP addressing. And if DHCP cannot provide an IP address to somebody requesting one, then it will fall into the category of APIPA, which is that private address, and it will fall into a 169 on its first octet. So kind of get to know that because there's usually a lot of questions in regard to that, and that DHC wasn't able to provide it, so that's why it became that. And then it will use NAT to get out later. But basically, that's the difference between those two that you need to have a good idea of. Lastly, let's look at our chapter quizzes and make sure you have all the answers that you wanted to know. So let's start with our quiz statistics for 1. All I'm going to do is look at our statistics are very skewed because we don't have a whole lot of people. The question breakdown, if it's not 100%, I'll read the question. The first one deals with NOS, Network Operating System, and that means that's completely false because it would need more memory, more processing power, and storage capacity than clients. So that's why this was false. The next one, static electricity is an electrical charge in motion. Okay, here's a key point. We just talked about dynamic and static. These two words come up a lot. Static means no motion, so that's false. Dynamic would be this if it was in motion. Let's see. Okay, the TCP protocol is considered connectionless or best effort delivery. That is UDP. TCP is the connection oriented and guaranteed delivery and segments in order. So basically, that's definitely false. Okay. At what layer of the OSI model does a network switch normally operate? All right, again, I've said this before, but routers operate at level 3. LAN switches operate at layer 2. That's something, now there are smart switches and all these other deviations, but realistically, always think about switches at layer 2, routers at layer 3. So here, our answer should be layer 2. Okay, What is the most popular web server application? And as your book noted, Apache. Okay. In the TCP/IP model, what layer combines the responsibilities of the application, presentation, and session layers from the OSI model? So those are the top 3 layers of the OSI model, which equate to the application layer of the TCP/IP model. So this should be application. It wouldn't be transport because that doesn't have anything to do with these. Transport deals with the ports and some other things, but okay, 80. Let's see, 80%. What if the network layer protocol is aware of a packet that is larger than the maximum size for its network? On Ethernet, oftentimes the maximum size is 1500, and in this situation, we know that the packet's going to be larger. Then the packet can be divided into smaller packets, and they segment them and number them if you're using TCP, but they will be made smaller by fragmentation. So that was the answer. It wouldn't be that they're dropped silently, even though we think that there are other, well, it's just not. We're not even going to go there. Okay. Remote desktop application utilizes what protocol to provide secure encrypted transmissions? Remote desktop. We only had one wrong. It wouldn't be secure shell, which does have to do with security, but it's not the right one. And these are going to work. First of all, file transfer protocol is completely in the clear. And secure socket, we usually use that with HTTP or some other things where we want to put in some more security. So we often use this one with, well, I'm not going to go into all that because I don't want to delay this. Yeah, okay. Oh, one thing about remote desktop protocol, and we're talking about port numbers, this one is 3389. And if you start thinking about these when you're talking about them, like as an example, file transfer protocol would be 20 and 21. And secure shell is 22. And so you're going to see different, oh, we're at the end. I'm like, why isn't it scrolling? And then the last one is, there we go. Okay, now let's look at the second quiz. Thought I had it up, but I don't. So, quiz 2. Quiz statistics. We did better on this one. We have 93 to 100%, so that's pretty impressive. Again, I'll only do the ones that aren't 100%. Okay, here's one. The bend ratio. You got the textbook answer, and that is correct, and that is absolutely a true statement. In the TIA, IEEE standards, they often use the word minimum, but that is exactly the same answer as you would have for, the idea is that you do not want the cable to be too tight. If you make little loops, you're going to degrade the value of the cable. So you have by this statement, the maximum arc is what you can loop it to without impairing data, which is that's it. In the other standards, in the actual standards, it uses the word minimum. So it's not to confuse you, but they are the same because that's it. That's where it has to be. They also talked about the 4 times thing. But anyway, this is an actually true statement because the maximum, it's a true statement. Okay. What statement identifies the purpose of a software patch? Well, that's the correction, improvement, enhancement. It's definitely not a major change. That would be more of an upgrade or things. So basically, We're just talking about a patch. What type of diagram is a graphical representation of a wired infrastructure? So this was in your text, wired schematic, and I understand it could be easy to get confused with a topology, but that's not, that's just the structure with a connectivity device. The network diagram is not this, so because this talks about wired infrastructure. That's why the wiring schematic is the answer. Service level agreement, good job, good job, good job, good job. All right. When creating network diagrams, what icon typically represents a network switch? That's the icon that is a rectangle, and it has the 4 arrows pointing in opposite directions. And if you look at these to kind of distinguish, this should have been a firewall, a brick. If you look at the hockey puck one, that should have been a router. And the squiggly lines mean wireless, so it could be like a wireless switch or a wireless router, but that's what this is. That rectangular shape would have been squiggly lines, would have been a wireless switch. What is not a best practice when performing cable management? Now this is part of the reason why I give you these kind of questions, because these are the exact same kind of questions they're going to give you. You have to read it carefully. What is not a best practice? Clearly, grounding requirements are good practice. Cable testers are good practice, and not placing cable across the floor. And the answer was cable ties should not be pulled tightly. And that's essential, because you can just damage the pairs or even the individual wires if you just pinch too tight. So be careful about how tight you put them. You want snug, but you don't want tight. All right, that concludes our summary, and let's move on to Chapter 4.